Welcome, everyone. In our last session, we talked about resilience, preparing for surprises, increasing adaptability, and building resilience. We talked about specific things we can be doing to be prepared and ready in the midst of a storm of epic proportions with uncertainty and unrest staring us down. And attendees shared some amazing insights. Chuck Bender shared that resilience was all about community, to trust in his ability to respond with the best next step available. He talked about avoiding catastrophizing, about knowing that opportunities always exist, and he talked about faith. Rob Samuelson talked about that he's learned to focus on what's important, that there's so much unproductive, angry, denial commentary that just doesn't matter. The insights were phenomenal. And today, Warren's going to talk about exponential impact, preparing for surprises, increasing your adaptability, and building resilience. A big thank you to you for being part of this series, because we're all connected through Warren, his leadership, and our gift of togetherness, incredible conversations and insights that have really helped us and supported us as we grow as leaders in this time. Thank you for your contribution, your questions, your leadership, and your togetherness in these uncertain times. And each week we introduce Warren. It's my favorite thing of every week, because many of you have seen Warren speak and attend events, and you know how it goes, something like this. And here's Warren. But for all of you that have not had the amazing opportunity to meet Warren or seen him speak before, Warren Rustand is the former CEO of Provident Service Corporation. He served as member of the board of directors of over 50 public, private, and not-for-profit companies. Warren served as appointment secretary to President Ford, global chairman of WPO, co-founder and dean of faculty at the entrepreneurs organization EO Leadership Academy, countless awards, Sports Hall of Fame, White House Fellow, but the award Warren treasures the most is Father of the Year in his hometown of Tucson, Arizona. Just remember, this is a conversation. Please continue to post your questions and share where you're from. We'd love to know. This live stream will live on this Facebook page, Warren S. Rustand, as well as future episodes. You can continue this conversation with Warren, and more importantly, with each other. Please share it. You can also find these series on YouTube, Warren S. Rustand page. Thank you all for being here. We are all in this together. Here's Warren.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever your time zone is, wherever you happen to be. We appreciate and welcome people from all over the world who are listening today and joining with us in spirit as we talk about important subjects. The leader within us is the notion that deep within us resides the great capacities, abilities, and skills to be what we want to be, to think about how we can have an exponential impact, which is our subject today. And we think about this virus, which is now 6 months long since February 1st, when we first learned about it, and its origination in China, and then its resulting impact on us. This virus has had an epidemic proportional reaction around the world. And it's been interesting how the entire world has been engulfed in this pandemic. And as a result of that, we have experienced exponential impact on us by something that's not our fault, we didn't create, and was brought to us by an act of nature. And so as a result of that, we are dealing with something that's really interesting. And as we reach within us to find that leader to deal with these particular situations, we've learned a lot about ourselves. This virus, which is now, as I said, 6 months old, is having a profound impact on individual lives, communities, and societies around the world. And our ability to deal with it and to handle it in the context of our businesses, our families, is profound and significant. It may be one of these once-in-a-lifetime experiences that we always talk about. We look for them, we want them. In some cases, they come to us. And in this case, we're dealing with something that's quite unique and significant, and something that hasn't happened in the world since 1918. Well, as we think about what we've learned in this process, We invite you to come into this conversation, to ask questions, to make comments, to get into the chat box, and to give us some thoughts that you might be having as we talk about this. And I'll talk about it today in three different parts. The first is this notion of what's happened to us. We've learned a lot about our families, ourselves, our businesses, our communities, our leadership, our preparation for these kinds of surprises. But we found out a lot about who we are and what we're doing. And let me suggest today the first lesson that we should learn of the three lessons that I want to suggest to you. The first lesson is go slow to go fast. I often talk about these mystical forces that exist in the universe that influence us in a variety of ways. And in different societies and religions and groups, we may call them by different names. But the fact is that there are influences in the universe, unseen, that in fact have an impact on the world. And this is one such time. So what do I mean by go slow to go fast? This pandemic has brought the world to a screeching halt. It has slowed everything. If we think back just 6 months ago, we were all operating at a frenetic pace. We were going very, very fast. We were overscheduled. We were on our technology all the time. We were going at an unbelievable rate of speed. And maybe these mystical forces conspired in a way to slow us down, to tell us it's time to change our pace, that we need to engage differently, and that we should have different activities from the ones in which we were currently engaged. So this notion that we could slow down is right in front of us. And for the last 6 months, we've slowed down dramatically. Well, let's use the family as an example. We've probably spent more time, constant time, consistent time with our family in the last 6 months, maybe than ever, because we're together all the time. We have been sheltering in place. We've been locked down. We have had limited outside activities. And so as a result, our family has become our key unit of organization within which we've been operating and functioning. Well, what has that done? What has that slowdown done? What has that intensity of time actually provided for us? Well, it's provided us a lot more time to get to know each other. It's provided us with deeper emotional ties, stronger attachments to our family, deeper relationships, greater understanding. And it's helped us focus on quantity of time versus quality of time. This notion that we can just give quality of time, I think, is a myth. Until we have quantity of time, we can't discern what quality of time actually is. And now that we have both, we should be much smarter, much better in our family. And if we think about our own humanity, we've probably made progress there too. We've reached out to neighbors, to colleagues, friends, and associates, to those who may now be unemployed, to those who have lost their businesses, lost their circumstances within which they were functioning just 6 months ago. And so all of that, when combined, the time with our family, the deeper understandings, the emotional attachments, right? The quality of time that we can now more easily figure out. That's exponential growth for us individually within our family. And we've had an exponential impact. So we use the word a lot, exponential, these days. What do we actually mean by that? Exponential means an ever increasing pace of speed. Things are growing faster and moving faster than ever before. And it also means a quantum leap forward. We're not moving arithmetically, we're moving geometrically. 1 and 1 isn't necessarily 2, 1 and 1 might be 4, these quantum leaps and quantum steps that we have. You may recall, let's look at the 100 meters in the Olympic Games. Slowly and steadily over decades, the time to run the 100 meters came down. And then along came Usain Bolt from Jamaica, who dropped the 100-meter world record to 9.58 seconds, a quantum step forward, significantly greater than anyone who had ever run the race before. He moved the needle exponentially, a quantum step forward. And so when we think about our family over the last 6 months, we've had an opportunity to take quantum leaps forward, to have exponential impact and to have exponential growth. And so it reminds me of a quote by the author Seneca. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor can a person be perfected without trials. And we are moving along to becoming better, to becoming more perfect. None of us are yet perfect, won't happen in this lifetime. But this notion that we can get better, this friction, these trials, is really important. And what we have to get out of is a victim mindset. And so many people that I've talked with over the last few months have started with the victim mindset. Why me? Whining, complaining, woe is me kinds of attitude. That won't get us anywhere. That won't move the needle exponentially. And so getting out of that victim mindset as soon as possible and moving toward a positive or abundance mindset is really important. An infinite mindset that everything is possible, even in times of disaster, even in times of difficulty. We have the opportunity to be significantly better than we have been before. So that creates this abundance within which we operate and function. We have the opportunity to be remarkably better. This big trial is about getting closer to perfection. It's moving our own needle forward. It's going slow to go fast. I often talk about the necessity of creating time and space where you can find your center, where you can find your clarity of vision, where you can move yourself forward. This time, this pandemic has created that opportunity for us. And so our exponential impact and growth is being felt. We recognize it internally, and others recognize it for us. Over the last few months, I've talked to hundreds of leaders of businesses, lots of different stories, some very sad, many of struggle and difficulty and challenge. Almost all of them have talked about the notion of this being a life-altering time, a time where they fundamentally looked at their lives and decided that they want to do something differently, that their future is going to be different than their past. And some of the suggestions I then ask, of course, what does that mean? What do you mean you're going to alter your life? The first thing that most people mention is, I'm not going to live at the pace I was living before. I'm not going to engage in that frenetic pace that I had of overscheduling, overcommitment, doing things less than well because I had too many things to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that many mention is that they've elevated and illuminated their family. That by spending more time with their spouse, significant other, their children, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, and so forth, that they've found a new joy in their life in being so closely associated with their family and of serving their family and of feeling the effects of the pandemic with their family and having it live through them, not happen to them, but having it live through them. This creates enormous opportunities for change and transformation personally. So as we think about that, the notion that we've been able to elevate family is critically important. And then the third thing that they often mention is the notion that they are going to live a more deliberate, precise, priority-driven life. That they're going to do what's most important, not just do to be doing. And I think all of us find ourselves sometimes just being active, chasing that next distraction, the next shiny object, when in fact, we can be much more precise about what we're doing and base our lives on our specific priorities. So the second takeaway, the first takeaway being go slow to go fast. The second I'd like to suggest, in a different way of thinking about it, we talked about family and self first, is really looking at our business careers and the challenges that we face and the future trends that we might see. So the second takeaway is focus on future trends. So when we're in this crisis, don't get sucked into the quagmire of the crisis itself, but rather look to that future and try to find out, where are things going and how might I capitalize on that? Significant crisis creates the opportunity for dynamic growth. Significant crisis creates the opportunity for dynamic growth. It's this notion that even in difficult times, we can grow exponentially, but we have to understand what trends might be coming. And so I just want to make a few observations about some trends that I'm seeing. Perhaps you see them differently, but just some suggestions about things that maybe you want to pay attention to. There are some that are obvious and some less obvious. And perhaps there are things that you can play into in a way that allow you to grow exponentially as a result of the crisis that you're seeing. It will allow you to change things in an interesting way. So we learned about our business leadership, right? Some good, some bad. Some can see the future clearly, some not so well. And this is one of those murky times of vagary, when it's more difficult to see what the outcomes might be. For many, when entering this pandemic, it was going to be a few weeks or a few months long. We're now half a year into this. It does not appear that this is going to end anytime soon. And I suspect a year from now, we'll still be talking about the pandemic. So as a result of that, where do these trends take us? In 2008, 9, and 10, the financial crisis that affected the entire globe, we saw the creation of some really interesting companies in that crisis, in that time of great difficulty and desperation by many. There were some who created that exponential impact. Airbnb, Lyft, Uber, Shopify, Spotify, and a host of other companies were created during that period of time. When everybody else was mired, there were many who saw the future more clearly. And so what is it going to be in 2020? What are those trends that we might see that could be interesting? And again, you might see them differently than I do, but let me suggest 8 trends without a lot of commentary that could be interesting for you to observe. And again, some are very obvious. First, online education. There are a host of students who will never return to school, and they will be online education from now on. And they'll operate at their own pace. They'll have programs to do that, but they'll be schooled at home. And it'll all be online at all levels. Primary, secondary, undergraduate, and graduate courses will be offered in new and different ways. So the impact on education is going to be profound. Are there opportunities for you that lie in that situation? The next is online work. We're going to see far fewer people crowding onto trains and in cars to commute to corporate headquarters. There are about 25 to 40% of people, depending upon your survey, that say they're no longer going to drive or commute to work. They're going to be working from home. Well, what does that mean? And are there trends, are there opportunities there that we might see? The third is the notion of direct to consumer has really changed. There's going to be an elimination of the middleman or woman as a distribution hub, and we're going to see many more opportunities for manufacturers to go directly to consumers. And so what does that mean? And are there opportunities that you could see within that? It's this notion that the whole process of getting products and services to the consumer will be altered in some ways. Is there opportunity there? The next is this notion that geography is history, meaning that for many, many decades, people have tried to find homes, apartments, condominiums, places to live near their employment because they'll be going to a particular place for their job each day. Well, because that won't be happening and there'll be a greater number of people working online, what does that mean for the commuting process? What does that mean for the residential process? And how does that translate into financial circumstances for both the person working at home and the employer? Smaller corporate headquarters, less commuting traffic, less need to go to the inner cities as they're defined. And so all of that will change that process a bit, and it's going to be interesting to see. And so where we live is not going to be nearly as important because we can live remotely. And I've talked to some real estate agents recently who see people leaving large metro urban areas and moving to more rural, smaller town areas because they can live and work anywhere they choose going forward. So there are substantial economic repercussions as we think about the dislocation of populations moving from one to another. Another is telemedicine. It's the notion that maybe we won't be going to see our doctor as frequently. And when we see our doctor, we may do that through a Zoom call, through a screen, and we may be diagnosed in that way. It has existed for 15 or 20 years, but it hasn't been used as readily. But given the virus and given the future, telemedicine may be something that's practiced both for behavioral health and for physical health. It could be really interesting. Another interesting trend. Another is this notion of mass personalization and mass customization, that more and more products are going to be designed and tailored, products and services designed and tailored for individuals, right? In a new and different way. 3D printing plays into that, but a host of other supply chain kinds of issues play into that as well. So it could be an interesting time for this mass personalization and customization. Another is the notion of, will the city center, as I mentioned ago, still be the hub of activity and will people be attracted to it? Or will we see suburbs becoming the new village centers? If more people are working from home, 30, 40, 50% of people working at home, then they won't have the need to go into the city centers. And this brings a dislocation away from the city centers into the suburbs, which could now be villages. And many services and opportunities that were provided in an inner city situation may now be provided in these villages or suburbs. And so it's just a different trend. And finally, perhaps manufacturing changes. And maybe the whole supply chain process changes a bit. Maybe raw materials get shipped into particular communities, and through 3D printing, those products are then produced and go to the point of sales directly. So there are opportunities. 3D printing continues to grow and change and develop, and the technology gets better and better. So those are 8 examples of just things that I would observe as we look at landscape today. There are probably 50 more that you can think of that would be good. But what I'm trying to present is this notion that focus on future trends. Where are you going? Where are societies going? Where are individual families and employers and employees going? And how is that impacted? And is there opportunity for you? Economic, financial, family, geography? How does that change your thinking? The third thing I'd like to talk about, and the third takeaway for you today, I call climb the second mountain. A couple of years ago, there was a best-selling author, David Brooks, wrote a book called The Second Mountain. And I was particularly taken by it. I think it's very interesting how he moved through his own self-awareness to recognize his own world and then to think about the world very differently. You see, most of us have 2 mountains in our lives. And the first mountain is the mountain of acquisition. And we're taught, trained, bred to be leaders, to drive economic engines, and to go out and make our mark and be bold in what we do. And when we do that, we get engaged in self, in branding, in ego, a quest for personal freedom. Our world is defined by I, me, my. We become a bit, or maybe even a lot, narcissistic in the process because we think of the world as an acquisition world, that our job is to climb that mountain, to acquire the materiality necessary to be successful in the world. And we oftentimes measure our success by how we compare to other people and their success, which in and of itself is a mistake, but the fact is we do it. David Brooks talked about a second mountain. Now, these 2 mountains are separated by a roaring river. To get to the second mountain, metaphorically, we have to cross that river. Now, we can build a bridge, go over on a rope, get a trolley car, swim. I mean, there are a lot of ways to get across the river. But we've got to get across the river, and that river might be called freedom. And while during our first mountain world of acquisition, we think the more we acquire, the more freedom we have. That may not be true. Because even if we sell everything, even if we have a lot of money, we have to manage that money. We have to be philanthropists. We have to do a host of things. And so freedom probably isn't ours necessarily. So we look at that second mountain with interest, and we know we have to ford that river. And if we can ford the river successfully, the second mountain in our lives is called contribution. The first acquisition, the second contribution. And it's about dissolving ego. It's about being a servant leader. It's about being cause-driven. It's about shedding those things of the world that hold us back and hold us down from recognizing and fulfilling our true potential. It's the notion of moving toward transcendence, something that Maslow talked about as the 6th point in his hierarchy of needs. Transcendence is the notion that there's a higher calling in life, there's a greater purpose in life, and that our lives ought to be about that greater purpose, that clarity of vision about who we truly are and where we're going, and how we can help people along the way. The words that describe us best in that are we, ours, us. Not I, me, my. We, ours, us. It's a collective thought process. It's a collaborative thought process. These 2 mountains are interesting. Now, the question is, can you have a foot in each mountain? Of course you can. Can you work in both mountains? Absolutely. But to achieve our highest potential, it is to recognize that we have to control and manage the world through our ego. We need to become more humble. We need to become more servant-based. And when we do that, we really employ people in a different way. Well, another quote that I like very much by Lao Tzu, a well-quoted, often mentioned author. He said, mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. And our efforts today, in this time of crisis and difficulty, ought to be about mastering ourselves and about moving to our greater purpose. And when we do that, we have exponential impact. Well, I invite your questions, your comments, your thoughts. I can see there are a lot of questions and comments. I appreciate them very much. I'll look forward to answering your questions. And I appreciate you allowing me to express myself in this conversation. And I look for us to have a dialogue as we go forward for the next few minutes, as opposed to a monologue. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. I also want to remind you, we're going to be talking again on Thursday, August 6th at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, the same time as this. But we're going to talk about family. And we're going to be talking about some ideas that may stimulate family in new and different ways. Now, family has become the center point of this epidemic and pandemic, and why don't we use it in new ways? So I welcome your calls. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to sharing these questions with you.
Great, Warren. So many questions. You ready?
I am. Thank you.
All right. So the first one is from Victor Sheldon. He's talking about the victim mindset. And one of his children is in this space and place with victim mindset. Curled up under the covers, what should he do?
Yeah, Victor, that's hard and that's difficult. And individuals, both children and adults, are facing this crisis differently. Some are just scared. So I think the first thing I would do is crawl under the covers with your child and hug them like crazy and reassure them that we're going to be okay. And then help them see some small successes and small ways of thinking positively, little things that you could do in your home environment with them. Speak in very positive terms. Be sure that you and your spouse and others in the environment are upbeat, optimistic, abundance mindset, infinite mindset thinkers, so that they're surrounded by positive thoughts. I think there are a lot of children who are scared. And sometimes they're scared because of the way the adults in that environment are talking about this pandemic. So let's be sure that first, as role models, we are the ones who are optimistic and positive. Second, let's hug and kiss them a lot. They need a lot of reassurance, right? And let's also admit to them that we don't have all the answers, but by golly, we're going to figure it out. We're going to be okay, right? So I think if you start with those small steps, perhaps that'll help a little bit. But never forget that hugs and kisses and reassurance and affirmation are critical for young children at all times. And most of all, don't be critical, don't be harsh, don't be judgmental with that child. Victor, I hope that helps you a little bit.
Thank you, Warren. One thing that reminds me of is just all of us together today. Every time we're together, these leaders together with you, you give us that sense of security. So thank you. So many members today. We've got members from Los Angeles, Kenya, Bahrain. We have Greece. We have Kansas City. We have Munich. We have Lithuania. So welcome, everybody. Please tell us where you're from. We'd love to know. We've got Indonesia. From Kalfunk. What is the number one advice you can give to us on what specific thing we should be focusing on to create exponential impact?
Carl, it's great to hear from you. You're a great friend. Always enjoy seeing you. Say hi to Angie for me. I hope you're both doing well. Insofar as our family is concerned and my own thinking about this, the most important thing to do is to learn through this process. It's what we learn. And then how do we apply that learning going forward? Because there are tremendous lessons that we have learned just in the last 6 months about ourselves, about who we are, about our businesses, about how we think in crisis. And we need to apply those thoughts and those lessons to the future world that's being created right before our eyes. For those who want to return to normal, there is no normal. We're never going back. In my opinion, the world ahead is different than the world we just left. And I believe we left that world the first week in March as soon as the lockdown was initiated, as soon as the shelter in place was initiated. I think the world changed forever. And the world will have some resemblance to the past as we go forward. It's not going to be completely rejected. But going back to the way it was is not something that's going to happen. So, Carl, it's what we learn from this and how we apply it going forward that's going to make the great gains for us. That's how exponential growth happens. That's how the quantum leaps are made forward. For those who choose not to learn, for those who choose to just hope for the past, I think it's difficult. I think we have some boomers in my generation who hope for the past, who look back and say those were better times. That's a good thought to have, but that's not the world in which we live, nor is it the future world. Our future world, Carl, is really about the one we're going to create. And through learning and experience share and our peer networks, we will apply what we have learned to a future state that's going to be different. My opinion, going to be better. I think the world ahead is going to be better. I'm an optimist by nature. And Carl, I know you are too.
Thank you, Warren. That actually ties to a question that Philip Hartman has. And what he's talking about, he's talking about the second mountain and this idea of, the past and the future. And he's asking, what are your thoughts on having a foot on each mountain? And what is the best way to find balance there?
Philip, great to hear from you. You're in Cape Town, South Africa. You're a great guy. I've spent some wonderful time with you. So all of you on this session know that Philip has a podcast called Dedicated. It's about entrepreneurial fathers and how to be a good entrepreneurial father. And he interviews some amazing people on his podcast. So Philip, thank you for your contribution to all of us who are dads and entrepreneurs. We really appreciate that. I think you can have a foot in each mountain. I think you can work both mountains successfully. It's finding the balance and the footholds that are necessary. For instance, take the best of the second mountain, which is about losing oneself, being a servant leader, being cause-driven, being commitment-driven, and apply it to our growth as entrepreneurs and growing business.
Looks like we lost Warren there for a second. All right, so Katie, I hope that answers your question about being on two sides of the mountain. So transversing both sides at one time. One thing about Warren talked about Usain Bolt. And one thing I wanted to just bring out is what I looked up quickly, kind of where he was in his space and place. And it says that Usain Bolt, he said, this is what I came here to do, right? He is the world leader in 100 meters, 200 meters, and 4x100 meters relay, which is phenomenal. But he said, this is what I came here to do. I'm a legend. I have nothing else to prove, which is just phenomenal. Think about that for a second. Nothing else to prove. And one thing I think about with this epidemic is I think about this whole idea of, and it's a question that Shane asked, what is the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned during this recent experience? And what I've learned is really about that we have the capacity to do so much more. And this is the space and the place we come from with Warren, right? That we have the capacity to do so much more. And it really comes for me from a place of stillness, right? And coming together with people like you to learn such amazing leadership lessons, right? Because it's what we're here to do. And so, Carl, when you ask about exponential impact, I honestly think we have it all within us to be exponential. It's really just about getting still and really finding that leader within us that Warren talks about to help us and support us through that process. Let me see if I can find Warren. Yeah, lost the feed. So let me just kind of answer some of your questions. One thing I want to also mention is Karan Bhatia, who has, actually, Karan, I believe you just launched a healthcare clinic called Sydenham Clinic. And you're specifically asking about what exponential impact is healthcare having here. And Warren talks about these individual trends that we're looking for in the future and what impact that has on pharma and healthcare innovation. And what we're saying is just this amazing space and place where innovation is happening. What I'm personally seeing is this notion that the world is connecting in ways that we have never connected before, that we are specifically looking outside every single country, city, business to leverage lessons from each other, which I've never seen in the history of this planet before. And that's very inspiring to me. That's very inspiring to me. I'm very, very intrigued and inspired by what you and your wife are doing, because you have taken your business and completely reinvented it, which is amazing to me, to really think through how healthcare is having an impact and how you can truly serve that. Warren's coming back. Hang on just a second. Warren, hi.
Hey, hi. How are you?
I was doing my very best.
I appreciate that. As you and I were talking earlier, it's the great thing about being live. At least one of the things that's happening to us. So I'm in Tucson, Arizona, right, and we have this tremendous storm that's just hit us. We only get about 12 inches of rain a year in Arizona, and it looks like we've got 12 inches today. It's just crazy right now. Lightning and thunder. Of course, Arizonans are crazy because we get so little rain. We run out in the streets and play during lightning and thunder in the rain, get all wet. So probably our grandchildren are out right now getting soaked to the core. I've decided to stay inside at least temporarily. So I appreciate that. Thank you for your patience. If you're still there, let's keep talking.
We're all here. And so Warren, I just had an opportunity to actually live out your greatest lesson, right? And that is to always be ready. So I hope
never be surprised, right? Always be ready, right?
I answered 2 questions, but maybe can you help me with this one? Okay. All right. So I was just talking about Karan. I'm gonna talk about you again, Karan Bhatia, who has launched and I hope I get the name right. I'm by memory. Sydenham Clinic. I think that's yeah. So he's asking about, and you talked about these amazing things are happening in the world in terms of future trends, and we all know that healthcare and big pharma are incredibly impacted. And he's really questioning sort of what can we do to leverage that? Because as you know, they have just started this business in the midst of this pandemic. What can we tell Karan?
Well, Karan and Anshel, your wife, it's great to talk with you, and Shahid, who helps run your business, president of your business. I know all of you, obviously, I was on a phone call with you yesterday. I think you're in the right spot at the right time. The Sydenham Clinic, founded on both the best of traditional medicine and the leading edge medicine combined to give wellness a whole new focus and a whole new opportunity. Health is really critical. And one of the things that we have learned during this pandemic is the importance of health. And whether that's the virus itself, or it's our personal physical conditioning, or it's our understanding of genomics, it's understanding of our personal DNA, all of that becomes really important. And the personalized nature and the customized nature of medicine going forward is going to be revolutionary, I believe. And so I think the Sydenham Clinic is in exactly the right spot at the right time. You all are doing very well. You've brought world-class medicine to people who desire customized and individual medicine at exactly the right time. So we can get exactly what we want in terms of the needs we have as an individual, as opposed to more generic medicine that sometimes gets practiced. So I think you're in exactly the right spot at the right time. And what you're doing in bringing this and awareness to this, first in Houston and then around the globe, is going to be fascinating to me. And one of the reasons I'm most interested in what you're doing is because you are leading edge. You are out there where you're creating new territory and new space in the field of medicine with world-class doctors. And I think that's really amazing. And I think what you're doing is going to be very exciting. And I know you'll be very successful.
And I think about the impact that Karan and the inspiration that he and his wife and his entire team are having on the planet is just, it's amazing, which actually leads to another question, Warren. So to super combo here with future trends and the second mountain, right? And having those 2 feet on both sides, we see these future trends, we see these opportunities, but we're still in the business where we're in.
Right.
How do we transition? How do we pivot? What do we do?
Yeah, the most important thing is to really step back, create time and space to think about your business currently, its current state, right? Some of the businesses have really been damaged during this period of time in terms of revenue and cash flow. Some businesses, about 25% to 30% of businesses, small and medium-sized business, simply have gone away and they will never be recreated. But if your business is still alive and functioning, think about number one is how can I use my current capacity and resources to pivot, to find new markets and diversify your revenue streams. Secondly, it is maybe opportune to create a new business, even as you run your current business, to create new businesses to take advantage of these trends and use your old business as a platform, cash flow and revenue and cash, to help finance and fund new opportunities, right? Because we see them all around us. We just see them all around us. And so the opportunities are sitting there for us to exploit and explore. So be very thoughtful, step back and say, what outcomes do I want to have? And then work backwards from those outcomes. And when you work backwards from the outcomes, it'll tell you what you need to do to execute against your outcomes. And when you do that, you have a great chance of being successful. I hope that's helpful, Karan. And I hope that's helpful in the way we're thinking about the business world.
So Warren, you talk about future trends, and this is a question from Jamie Draghi. And he's asking, where can we learn more about future trend sources? Where should we be looking for this information?
Yeah, really a good question. I think you have to find some new sources of information. First of all, there are institutions that are futuristic and are thinking about the future. Singularity University is a great example. EO has partnered with Singularity University on some activities, but EO and Singularity are thinking together about that future. There are other think tanks. There's the Hudson think tank, for example, that has focused for decades on what the future of the world is going to be. There are individuals that I'll go without naming them, but there are certain individuals that we think of as futurists and who in fact spend their time in a future world. It's a little bit like the story I like to tell. Many years ago, as a young man in my 20s, I was invited to a dinner of just 5 people, one of whom was going to be a man named John Galvin. And everybody knew who John Galvin was. He was the founder and CEO of a company named Motorola. And they had, he had probably 3,000 patents to his name. I mean, he's an amazing guy. And so we sat down to dinner, and I thought I'd ask him an ice-breaking question. I said, "Where do you live?" And it was a geographic question, right? But he gave me a philosophic answer. He said, "I live in the future." And that really changed how I think about the world, because all of us need to live and have some space in the future. Always be thinking about where we're going, not thinking about where we've been. Not getting tied to our past, success or failure, because that's gone. That's behind us. Where we are today and where we're going tomorrow is really critical. And I often say, Jamie, you know this about me. I often say, my best day is going to be tomorrow. My best week is next week. The greatest acquisition we're going to make is just a month away. The whole notion that we can be future thinking all the time just makes us a more interesting person to be around and more fun to be around. And I love being around people who engage in big ideas and are thinking about the future. Jamie, you happen to be one of them. And your lovely wife is even smarter than you are.
I'll +1 on that one. Okay, so last question, really great question. And your first point was really about going slow to go fast. And this question is about, so what do we do to stop doing things? Like, how do we say no? How do we not do some things that we know we should be doing to give us the space and place to go faster?
One of the great exercises that we've been taught over years by many people is the start, stop, continue notion. What do I need to stop doing? What do I need to continue doing? And what do I need to start doing? Make your lists. Just make your list. Start, stop, continue. That will begin to eliminate some of the things that you're now doing that don't have any great value and allow you to focus on your higher priority items, things that you want to do. That's the start list. And then there's some things you're already doing that are fantastic. You want to continue those, right? You want to continue those. So start with that. Start, stop list, start, stop, continue list would be a great exercise for you in your life. And you can do that with your family, your business, your community, yourself. What are the things I just need to stop doing? What are the things I need to continue doing? And what are the new things I need to start doing? And when we do that exercise, I believe that it gives great definition and illumination to the kinds of things in which we ought to be engaged. Look, as a closing comment, and I hope you can all still hear me because of this storm. Look, this is a hard and difficult time. and it presents numerous challenges to it that we'd never thought possible in our lifetime. And yet it also creates this new window of opportunity for us, this new look at the future. Let's use that to our best advantage, and let's be as successful as we can be. I look forward to having a conversation with you about family coming up on August 6th, 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And remember these three takeaways. Go slow to go fast. Take time to pause, reflect, think, introspect before you go fast. Next, focus on future trends. Look at what's happening out there and how you can play into that in a successful way. And then lastly, let's look hard at climbing that second mountain where we lose our ego and our brand and our legacy and ourself and all that notion. And we really focus on the higher purpose and calling of our lives with clarity and certainty, and we do it with humility. Looking forward to talking with you again. Take care of yourselves.